never imagined a quiet morning at the Santa Rosa Valley Farmers Market would lead to the takedown of one of the largest drug trafficking networks in American history. It all started when 5 members of the infamous Cartel picked the wrong target, an overweight farmer they thought would be an easy mark. What they didn't know was that beneath the sun-faded overalls and friendly grin stood one of the military's most elite combat specialists. Joseph Cameron had spent the last 8 years blending into small-town life, hiding his Delta Force background under the mask of a local produce vendor. The extra weight? Not part of any disguise, just life after war. But despite his size and laid-back demeanor, this man had once led some of the deadliest missions in modern warfare. That morning, cartel enforcer Alejandro Vargas thought he was confronting a harmless, out-of-shape farmer. Instead, he triggered a chain reaction that would shake the entire criminal empire and expose a drug route stretching from Mexico to Canada. But before we dive deeper, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story grabs you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode, something special's coming your way. The early sun cast long shadows across the market as Joe's battered pickup truck pulled into its usual spot. Every move he made unloading crates was precise, almost surgical, despite the 300 pounds on his 6'2" frame. At 55, Joe didn't look like a threat. But there was nothing random about how he set up his stall. Locals were already drifting in. Sofia Rodriguez, sharp-eyed at 75, watched him arrange heirloom tomatoes with near-military precision, though she had no idea it was military precision. To her and the rest of Santa Rosa, Joe was just the friendly guy who took over his family's land after some vague government gig back east. "Those tomatoes are looking especially fine today, Joe," she said, tugging her shawl tighter. "Your grandmother's variety," he replied, gently placing another tomato. Same seeds she used. Some things are worth preserving. But while his tone was casual, Joe's mind was quietly scanning everything. 8 years of pretending hadn't dulled his instincts. He noted every vendor's location, the sight lines between stalls, all exit routes, and anything that could be used as a weapon. Then his phone buzzed. Not a regular phone, a modified flip model designed for covert communication. One message: package moving, 48 hours. Joe erased it instantly, his expression unchanged as he continued chatting with Sophia about tomato care. At 8:47 a.m., the sound of 3 SUVs echoed off the hills. Joe didn't need to look. He recognized the pattern. Armored, formed up. The cartel was early today. Usually they waited until the market was full. Sophia tensed. Oh dear, those awful men again. Maybe they're just passing through, Joe murmured, already knowing that wasn't true. His recent intel said the cartel was growing bolder. Something big was on the horizon. And this was just the opening act. The vehicles turned the corner in flawless formation. Alejandro Vargas led the convoy, his designer suit doing nothing to hide who he really was. Behind him came Manuel Reyes, the muscle, and 3 others Joe didn't recognize. They parked to partially block the market entrance. Not an accident. Vargas stepped out first, radiating arrogance. Joe noticed the bulge under his jacket. New. He hadn't carried in public before. "Well, well," Vargas called out, his voice cutting through the market like a blade. "Looks like the locals are having themselves a little veggie party." Joe kept placing produce, calm, unbothered, his head low, but his eyes tracked every move. Reyes was weaving between stalls, knocking things over for show. Another man had slipped behind the flower stand, covering the west exit. "Morning, gentlemen," Joe called out casually. "Looking for some fresh produce?" Vargas's head snapped toward him, surprised by the friendly tone. He marched over, his expensive boots scraping the pavement. Joe noted the limp, favoring his right side. Recent injury. Within 48 hours, most likely. Vargas sneered. "Actually, fat man, we're here for our cut. This market's on our turf now, in case you missed the memo. Time for folks to show some respect." "This is outrageous," Sophia snapped, gripping her bag tighter. "This market's been here for 40 years. "Hey, Sophia," Joe said softly, not taking his eyes off Vargas. "Why don't you go help Mrs. Chen with her flowers? I think she could use the help." Sophia hesitated, but something in his voice, calm but commanding, made her obey without a word. Vargas smirked. Smart move, get the old lady out of the way. Wouldn't want her seeing what happens to stubborn farmers. Joe just smiled, his voice still pleasant. But inside, the switch had already flipped. He was calculating every variable. Cartel positions, civilian proximity, possible improvised weapons. Things work just fine here, he said, tone steady. Always have, always will. Right then, Reyes appeared beside Vargas, slowly crushing a tomato in his thick fist. And that's when the storm truly began. Red tomato pulp burst in Reyes's hand, dripping between his fingers and splashing across Joe's carefully arranged display. Times have changed, old man, Reyes growled. You better learn to adapt. Joe stared at the mess. 8 years undercover had taught him discipline, to respond with measured calm, to keep his body language submissive. But something felt different this time. This wasn't random intimidation. The cartel's aggression felt deliberate, focused. Those are $3 each, Joe said mildly. Vargas let out a sharp, mocking laugh. You hear that, boys? Farmer thinks he can charge us. He leaned closer, breath thick with expensive cologne, an attempt to cover the faint scent of gunpowder. Joe noticed his pupils, dilated, cocaine, unpredictable, volatile. But that also meant he'd likely miss the small things, like how Joe had subtly shifted his stance, or how his hands now rested in relaxed, casual positions. That could turn lethal in a heartbeat. The next few minutes matter more than you realize, son, Joe said quietly, his voice low enough for only Vargas to hear. Might want to think real hard about what you're about to do. For a second, something flickered in Vargas's eyes. Hesitation. But it vanished under a mask of swagger. Then, just in time, a sheriff's patrol car rolled into view. Diana Walker, always punctual. Vargas stiffened, frustration flashing across his face. This isn't over, fat man, he spat. This market's gonna learn real soon who runs things now. With that, the cartel turned and retreated to their vehicles, tires crunching gravel as they drove off. Vendors began reappearing from their hiding spots, murmurs rising as normal life slowly resumed. Sophia rushed over. Oh, Joe, are you okay? Those terrible men. I'm fine, Sophia, Joe said calmly, gently restacking his crushed produce. Some folks need to tear others down just to feel big. But inside, Joe's mind was racing. Everything confirmed his suspicions. The cartel's new aggression, the show of weapons, the claims of control, all pieces in a much larger puzzle. And the picture was becoming clearer. His phone buzzed again. Meeting at Christine's, 1 hour. He deleted it without a trace of emotion. This morning's confrontation wouldn't intimidate him, it would accelerate the mission. The Kaloa cartel thought they'd pushed around a simple farmer. They had no idea they'd just tripped the wire on an 8-year operation. Christine Stewart's veterinary clinic sat quietly at the edge of Main Street. It looked like any small-town animal care center, but it hid far more than wagging tails and routine checkups. Joe pulled his truck around back, immediately noting 3 unfamiliar vehicles, government plates, hidden antennas, civilian disguises that didn't quite pass. Inside, the bell over the door chimed as he entered. Christine looked up with a warm smile, part of the script. Your usual patient still doing okay, Joe? She asked cheerfully, already reaching for a file labeled with the name of a dog that didn't exist. The waiting room was empty, except for 3 men pretending to be deep in magazines or phones. Doing just fine, Joe replied, taking the file and heading straight for exam room 3, the room with the best sight lines to both exits. 5 minutes later, Sheriff Diana Walker arrived, her uniform sharp as ever. She made small talk with Christine, poured herself coffee, then slipped into the exam room. Heard there was a little trouble at the market this morning, she said casually, settling onto a stool. Just a few guys trying to act tough, Joe said, his frame leaning into the table, the surface creaking beneath him. Guys with weapons, she said more quietly. Vargas has never carried before. Times are changing, Joe replied, matching her low tone. Diana narrowed her eyes. My timing this morning wasn't luck. I got an anonymous tip, very specific about when I should be driving by. Joe allowed a small smile. The plan was moving. A man from the waiting room folded his magazine and walked into the room. Rafael Mendoza, DEA handler, known in town as the new feed supplier. "Mind if I join?" he said, already taking a seat. "No surprise who showed up this morning," Mendoza said. "Vargas is escalating." Christine entered quietly and locked the door behind her. The other two clients took position near the exits, standard protocol when things got real. "It's more than that," Joe said. "This isn't just a turf show. Their entire structure is shifting. More coordinated, more resourced. They're planning something." Mendoza nodded. "We've picked up chatter. Major shipment coming through their zone. Could be the biggest yet. But there's something else." Diana leaned in. "Cartel leadership?" "Worse," Mendoza said. "Someone's consolidating operations, bringing the independents under central control. Kaloa's presence here is just one piece of a bigger map." Joe thought back to the market. The weapons, the new tactics, the arrogance. "They're getting backing," he said. "Funding, logistics, but they're also being tested." "Tested?" Diana asked. "This morning wasn't just harassment. It was a live test, to see how long law enforcement takes to respond, to observe market layout, escape routes, civilian density. The farmers' market gives them control of 3 major access roads with direct line of sight to the highway." Mendoza pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. "This came in last night. Satellite images of their compound outside town." Joe studied the screen. His military instincts kicked in immediately. Subtle changes, new guard rotations, reinforced gates, hidden patterns most wouldn't catch. But he did. The pieces were falling into place, but they weren't just responding anymore. They were preparing. The cartel compound was changing. Structures expanding, vehicle bays reinforced. They weren't just strengthening security. They were transforming the site into a full-scale distribution hub. "We've got a window," Mendoza said. 2 days, maybe 3 before the shipment arrives. After that, if our intel's right, the whole operation disappears, shielded by whoever's backing them. Christine re-entered the room with fresh coffee, her routine practiced, but her tone tight. "They're recruiting too," she said. "I overheard Reyes at the diner last night bragging about new members, guys with military backgrounds, specific skill sets." Joe processed the new information, connecting it to months of patterns and surveillance. "They're being restructured," he said. "Turned from street thugs into a disciplined, scalable criminal network. Somebody's professionalizing them. That's why our window is critical," Mendoza added. "If we wait, we lose everything. The cartel, the drugs, and most importantly, proof of who's funding this." Diana shifted, uneasy. "My deputies aren't ready for a paramilitary outfit. Not if these guys are getting combat training." "They won't need to fight," Joe said calmly. "But we'll need them ready to lock the town down the moment this breaks open. The market incident? That was just the start. The cartel's about to make a serious move." "How do you know that?" she asked. Joe didn't hesitate. "Because that's how you take over a town. Suppress resistance, secure control, lock down your supply lines. It's basic military strategy." Mendoza nodded slowly. "The question is, how do we flush them out before they finish the transition?" A thin smile crossed Joe's face. "They already gave us what we need." That stunt at the market wasn't just posturing, it was about dominance. "They expect I'll be scared off, maybe skip town." "And when you don't?" Christine asked. "They'll be forced to escalate. Their backer won't tolerate weakness. They'll have to send a message. Their own structure demands it." "It's risky," Mendoza warned. "If their training is real, they might spot the trap." Joe shook his head. "Their training will betray them. They'll look for threats in all the usual places. Law enforcement, rival gangs, surveillance. No one sees the overweight farmer." The briefing lasted another hour. Contingency plans were outlined, roles defined, and when the others left, Joe remained, standing silently in exam room 3, watching the quiet streets of Santa Rosa Valley through the clinic window. Christine approached with one last cup of coffee. "You know they'll come for you, right? Vargas won't let that confrontation slide." "I'm counting on it," Joe replied. His voice wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, grounded in experience. Sometimes the best way to expose a hidden enemy is to let them believe you're the easiest target. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Joe pulled into his driveway. His eyes flicked to the unmarked car parked 2 blocks away. Cartel surveillance, obvious, amateur. They wanted him to know he was being watched. Intimidation by presence. Inside the farmhouse, doors locked, security sealed, Joe activated his intel system. A web of surveillance, analysis, and recon work so advanced it would have impressed his Delta Force commanders. Every cartel movement, every delivery, every new face. It was all logged, mapped, studied. His phone buzzed. A message from Mendoza. Confirmed. Increased activity at compound. Military-grade equipment incoming. Joe deleted the message. No reaction, no change in expression. It was unfolding exactly as predicted. The morning confrontation had rattled them, and now they were accelerating, making mistakes. The cartel wanted control, but they were rushing, acting emotionally, pushing timelines out of fear. He noticed the pattern of vehicles, new visitors, men with the gait and posture of trained soldiers, expensive gear, coordination. Their backer was sending support, trying to polish this gang into something more dangerous. But discipline brings predictability, and predictability can be weaponized. Another message buzzed in, this one from Christine. Cartel members at the clinic heard them talking about teaching lessons tomorrow. Multiple teams mentioned. Perfect. They were moving faster than even he expected, driven by ego, pride, rage. Vargas couldn't let what happened at the market go unanswered. Not in front of his crew, not with his name on the line. Joe began preparing, but not with obvious defenses. No reinforcements, no calls for help. He'd let them believe what they wanted, that he was just a frightened farmer trying to quietly protect his land. Let them come. Let them think they had the upper hand. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun. It's 8 years of being underestimated, of being dismissed, of being overlooked. Tomorrow would change everything, just not the way the Kaloa cartel imagined. Crafting and telling stories like this takes time, so if you're enjoying it, hit that subscribe button. It truly means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The sun was setting over Santa Rosa Valley as Joe Cameron completed his final perimeter check around the farmhouse. To anyone watching, he looked like nothing more than a tired man, just another day wrapping up on the farm. But what came next would rewrite everything. To any outsider, Joe Cameron looked like he was just wrapping up a normal day, checking on livestock, locking gates, moving with the slow, steady rhythm of an aging farmer. But every motion had purpose. Each task doubled as surveillance, assessing sight lines, identifying movement, mapping blind spots. At 8:47 p.m., the first cartel vehicle rolled by, a black SUV crawling past the edge of his property, headlights flickering. Manuel Reyes was behind the wheel, casing the place. Recon. 2 more vehicles followed, staggering their arrival times, quietly locking down the farm's access points. His phone buzzed. Christine calling from the clinic. Her voice was tight, urgent. "They were here earlier," she said. "Vargas and Reyes, loud on purpose, talking about making you an example. At least 8 men, maybe more. They mentioned burning the barn, killing your livestock. They want to ruin you, keep you from ever selling at the market again." "Appreciate the heads up," Joe replied evenly. "Joe," her voice dropped to a whisper. "This isn't like before. These new guys, they move different. Military, I'd bet on it." "Good," he said. "That'll make things interesting." He ended the call before she could argue. From his security command center, a hidden system he'd spent 8 years building, Joe tracked them. 8 heat signatures, moving low, disciplined, tight formation. No question, former military. Their movement patterns screamed recent combat experience. The cartel wasn't just leveling up, they were evolving. At 9:45 p.m., they made their first move. Engines revved in the dark, vehicles circled just beyond visibility, a textbook intimidation tactic. Then Vargas's voice boomed from the shadows. "Nobody disrespects the Kaloa cartel, especially not some fat farmer." Through a night vision scope, Joe watched them split into 3 assault teams. Clean formations, perfect coverage. They were trained well, too well. That was the weakness. At exactly 1 a.m., the first breach team kicked in his front door. Joe heard them clearing rooms, calling out positions. "House is clear," one said over the radio. "No sign of the farmer. But he's got surveillance everywhere." Vargas responded instantly. "Find the recordings. Anything that could compromise us. Then torch the place." Joe clicked his radio to Mendoza on a secure line. "They've taken the bait. Moving to phase 2. "Deputies are 5 minutes out," Mendoza replied. "Want backup closer?" "Negative. This has to look real." Moving through the darkness, Joe approached the SUV where Vargas was overseeing the op. The cartel lieutenant was too focused on his comms to notice the 300-pound shadow closing in. One smooth motion, the door yanked open. Vargas yanked backward into a chokehold. "Evening, son," Joe whispered, arm locking tight around his throat. "Might want to tell your boys to stand down before this gets messy." Vargas thrashed, but Joe's technique was flawless. Decades of Delta Force experience in every movement. "You're just a farmer," Vargas choked out. Joe squeezed just enough to send a message. "No, I'm the guy who teaches people why targeting civilians is bad for business." Glass shattered from the barn. "Boss," Reyes's voice crackled on the radio, "you need to see this. This ain't just a farmer's setup. This guy's wired for war." Joe sighed. "Guess we're doing this the hard way." In a fluid motion, he dropped Vargas with a precision chokeout and keyed his mic. "Mendoza, time to move." Sirens flared in the distance, but the real storm had already begun. Joe moved like a wrecking ball in the dark, not wild, not brutal, controlled, precise, surgical. He used his weight strategically, each strike calculated to disable, not kill. The cartel's military training made them predictable, rigid tactics that failed in the chaos of hand-to-hand combat. One by one, he dismantled the assault teams. He left escape routes open, just as planned. Several fled, shouting into radios, already preparing to report what they'd seen. The farmer wasn't just a farmer. By the time law enforcement rolled up, the scene was exactly as it needed to be. Evidence gathered, cartel operatives scattered, and just enough mystery to draw bigger eyes. Joe stood inside his exposed security room, watching as Sheriff Diana Walker stepped onto the property. "Phase 2's done," he said. "Now we wait for whoever's pulling the strings." Just before sunrise, local press arrived. Lucia Torres from the Valley Herald, notepad in hand, instinct buzzing. "Mr. Cameron," she asked carefully, "can you tell us what happened here last night?" Joe played his part to perfection. His hands trembled slightly. His voice was shaken, confused, just a man who had survived something horrific. "They came out of nowhere," he said. "Said I disrespected them. Tried to burn my barn, kill my animals. I thought I was going to die." He described his lucky escape, the miracle of surviving, the terror he still felt. The performance was flawless, just enough emotion, just enough detail. But behind the tired eyes and rumpled shirt was a strategist still watching, still calculating, because the real enemy hadn't shown its face yet, but soon it would. As the cameras rolled and microphones hovered, Joe finished his statement with just the right note of quiet resolve. "I just did what anyone would do," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "This is my home, my family's land. I couldn't let them take that." Behind the scenes, hidden security cameras streamed footage to Mendoza's team, who were already documenting the real evidence: high-grade weapons, encrypted tech, tactical gear. While local police focused on the staged crime scene, the DEA worked quietly, efficiently. Vargas had already been transferred to federal custody. To the public, he was just another gang leader who fled the scene. But in truth, he was now a key witness, and a liability to whoever was funding this operation. "They're pulling out fast," Mendoza's voice came through the secure channel. "Multiple vehicles leaving the compound. Your little stand at the farm scared them." Joe watched as a second news crew arrived. The narrative was spreading. Local farmer stands up to cartel intimidation. a powerful story, one that forced their enemies to respond. One of Mendoza's agents approached quietly. "Sir, you'll want to see this. The gear we pulled from their vehicles. It's not just black market. This is active use Special Forces level equipment." Joe kept up his shaken farmer performance as he reviewed the evidence under the table. It confirmed what he'd suspected for weeks. This wasn't just a cartel expansion. Someone with deep military ties and serious resources was backing them. "They'll have to make a move now," he said to Mendoza. "Their backer can't risk exposure. Next time they won't send cartel muscle. They'll send professionals." "You sure we're ready for that?" Mendoza asked. "We have to let them think they're still in control," Joe replied. "They need to believe I'm just a lucky farmer who stumbled into something bigger than he understands. And when they come to shut me up, that's when we find out who they really are." As the morning wore on, Joe gave more interviews, accepted hugs from concerned neighbors, and played the role of a humble, traumatized citizen who'd just survived a violent ambush. Meanwhile, his hidden surveillance systems picked up frantic movements back at the cartel compound. "Multiple new arrivals," Mendoza reported. "Contractors, military posture. They're bringing in outside operatives to assess the situation." "Good," Joe said, nodding. "Let them. Every move they make now reveals something. Who they call, what they bring, where they look. We watch everything." The sun climbed higher over Santa Rosa Valley, casting long shadows on a war no one knew was being fought. To the cartel, it looked like they were covering a leak. In reality, they were stepping into an 8-year-long trap. By late morning, state police were wrapping up their part of the investigation. Joe sat quietly on his front porch, sipping coffee, maintaining the mask of a man who was just barely holding it together. Mendoza joined him with 2 steaming mugs in hand. His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "3 got away," he said, "just like you planned. Already picked up chatter on cartel comms. They're rattled." "Perfect," Joe replied. "If they tell the story, it sticks, makes it real." "And Vargas?" "Chatty," Mendoza said with a smirk. "Turns out all that training didn't include how to handle pressure." He confirmed what we suspected. Encrypted comms, top-tier logistics, but no direct contact. He's never seen their backer's face. Sheriff Walker walked up, brushing dust from her uniform. "The media's growing by the minute. You want me to handle the press?" Joe shook his head slowly. "No, I've got this. If we want them to believe the story, I need to be the one to sell it." Just then, Lucia Torres from the Valley Herald stepped forward, her camera crew right behind. Her instincts were buzzing. She knew there was more here than a botched home invasion. "Mr. Cameron, could you walk us through what happened last night?" Joe let his hands tremble again as he spoke. "I was just doing evening chores when they showed up. 8, maybe 10 of them. The way they moved, it wasn't random, military trained. They said they were going to make an example of me. Show the town what happens when you don't respect cartel territory. And how did you stop them?" "Just got lucky," he said with a weak smile. "Did some boxing back in the day. And being this size," he patted his stomach, "it's hard to move me when I don't want to move." Off camera, Mendoza's team continued analyzing the real story. What they'd found in the cartel's trucks was beyond disturbing. Encrypted comms devices, advanced surveillance tools, tactical weapons still in active use by elite forces. One of the agents approached quietly. "We've ID'd some of the gear. It's not just surplus, it's current issue, restricted. Someone's funneling Special Forces resources straight to the cartel." Christine arrived with another round of coffee and a look of concern. She played her role perfectly. "Joe, you should have called someone when you saw them coming." "Wouldn't have helped," Joe replied, voice carrying a bitter edge. "They cut the landlines, jammed cell signals. Whoever sent them knew exactly what they were doing." More news vans rolled in, more questions, and each time, Joe gave the same answers: calm, shaken, resilient. But behind the weathered face and trembling hands, a soldier waited, watching, listening, knowing that everything was unfolding exactly as planned. When cartel thugs tried to intimidate Joe Cameron, a seemingly simple farmer in Santa Rosa Valley, they unknowingly triggered a years-long covert operation. Joe, a former Delta Force operator living under deep cover, had spent 8 years preparing to expose a growing network of corruption linking cartels, private military contractors, and stolen U.S. military equipment. After the failed intimidation, the cartel's mysterious backers escalated, sending in elite contractors, launching surveillance operations, and attempting to isolate Joe with legal pressure and social manipulation. Joe played the role of a shaken farmer while secretly documenting every move through a sophisticated surveillance network. As contractors brought in military-grade weapons and began demonstrations for foreign buyers, the operation grew beyond mere intimidation. It became proof of concept for privatized military control. Joe and his allies recorded everything: illegal weapons sales, civilian surveillance, and the use of classified military technology against U.S. citizens. When the contractors deployed special teams to enforce control, the town began resisting. Quietly but effectively, farmers, deputies, and residents organized, tracking movements, sharing information, and standing up to fear. Joe's team intercepted communications confirming foreign buyers, Pentagon connections, and a much deeper level of corruption. The tipping point came when the contractors staged a live demonstration, turning Santa Rosa Valley into a model for private military dominance. But Joe's surveillance systems broadcasted it live, exposing everything to the world. Federal agencies intervened, foreign buyers fled, and the operation collapsed. Hundreds were arrested. Congressional hearings followed, laws changed, private military forces were banned, and oversight of defense contractors tightened. Joe's operation became the catalyst for national reform, showing how profit-driven military power threatens democracy. In the end, Joe remained in Santa Rosa Valley, not just as a former operator, but as the farmer who helped his community resist corruption. His mission proved one truth: military power must serve the people, not private interests.